And so thus it was in this most unorthodox setting that Jesus chose to introduce to His disciples the most revolutionary and electrifying revelation of all time, the truth about the ecclesia, or in other words, the church, which He was about to establish. But before He did this, there were some preliminary matters that He had that had to be corrected. So if you're taking notes, I want you to jot these down. Some preliminary matters before Jesus could establish the church. He had to take care of a few things. First of all, the perspective. Number one, the perspective. You see, the perspective of the disciples regarding the true identity of Jesus had to be clearly spelled out and understood. I want you to go back to verse 13 there. Jesus asked His disciples a very simple question. He said, "Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And, we were talking a little bit this morning in Sunday school about the disciples. Did you know the disciples were slow learners? They didn't catch on to things very fast. And I'm the same way. I have to be told several times. Okay, I see another hand over there. We're slow learners. And we always revert back to old ways, so to speak. And we have to learn those lessons all over again. And so here it is. Jesus is trying to teach His disciples another profound lesson, as if they didn't already understand. And so He asked a very simple question. Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Now the answers the disciples gave were quite interesting. You see the answers there in verse 14. They said, some say you are John the Baptist, some Elijah, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. You see, for according to their report, the people, the crowds, the people that associated themselves, Jesus, with the three great voices of salvation in the Bible. And so let's briefly look at those real quickly. First of all, some people thought that this was actually John the Baptist. Well, who was John the Baptist? He was the forerunner. He was not the Messiah. He was the forerunner for Jesus. He was the herald of the new age of God's grace, in which salvation is through identification with the only true sacrifice for sin. In other words, remember what John said in John 1:29? Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. John, he didn't say it's me. John said, I'm the forerunner. I am not the Messiah. I'm not the one that can save you. But there is Jesus. There is the Lamb of God. Secondly, though, some of the people, they identified Jesus as Jeremiah. Who was Jeremiah? Well, Jeremiah was the Old Testament prophet. He was actually known as the weeping prophet. I guess he was just so depressed, I guess, in a sense, or distressed. His message, clearly, though, was reform and hope. So distressed, this ancient prophet. You see, he saw his people committing spiritual suicide. He watched as they rushed down a dead-end road destined to end in humiliation and defeat. But shining through this weeping prophet's message of judgment, there was always present the call to reform, the call to surrender, and then to cherish the hope that comes when one's faith is placed in God. But then others, they said there, well, he might be John the Baptist, he might be Jeremiah, but then some of them said, no, he might be Elijah. Who was Elijah? Elijah was the prophet of power and miracles, who had, they thought that he had come back to earth. For they had witnessed the miracles that Jesus had performed, and their hearts had been gripped by the power with which He spoke. But the sad thing about these associations the people made with Jesus is that not one of them, listen to me, church, here's the thing, because we're talking about the perspective. Jesus simply asked, He asked a simple question. Who do the people say that I am? Now think about it. The people watched Jesus. They talked with Jesus. They walked with Him. And not a single one of them said, you are the Messiah. You are the Son of God. And so Jesus said, we've got to set things straight. I'm not John the Baptist. I'm not Jeremiah. I'm not Elijah. I'm not one of these other Old Testament prophets. I am the Messiah. How do people view Jesus Christ today? Think about that for a moment. Here we are, 2,000 years later. How do you view Jesus? Do you just think of Jesus as someone sitting up in heaven, there to talk to when you need Him, or to answer your prayers, to give you what you want? I hope not. You see, relatively few people in our century have not heard the name Jesus. There are very few people in this world that have not heard the name Jesus, especially in our area, the Bible Belt, but in our Western culture, where Christianity is the dominant religion, most believe in the historical Jesus, that He lived 2,000 years ago in Palestine, and He died a martyr's death. But you see, very few recognize Him as the risen, ascended Christ, seated at the right hand of the Father in heaven, ever living to make intercession for His people. But to believe that Jesus lived on earth and was a good man and was a good teacher or supreme teacher is simply not enough. In other words, in order to be saved, you have to believe in Him as the living God and allow Him to be Lord of your life. So first of all, there is the perspective. Secondly, there is the profession. The profession. I want you to go back to verse 15. This brings us to the second stage in the discussion that Jesus was having with His disciples that day near Caesarea Philippi. In verse 15, Jesus said, "But whom do you say that I am?" So Jesus now turns the table. You see, Jesus first asked, who do these people that follow us, the crowd, who do they say that I am? But now Jesus asks His disciples, because He wanted to know what they thought. He says, "Who do you say that I am?" Peter's answer was calm and calculated. Now, if you know anything about Peter, you know that's not Peter. Peter was always the one sticking his foot in his mouth. Okay? Peter was always the one saying things before he thought. But now, for once, Peter did something. He had no idea what he actually did. Peter, he was calm. He was calculated. Born out of the experiences that he had with Jesus throughout the moments he and the other disciples had been with him. It came after he and the others had answered Jesus' first question, "Who do men say that I am?" And so he had some time to think about it. He had some time to weigh the question thoroughly and fully. His answer did not come on the crest of some high emotional experience, for it was a deliberate response. So let's look at what Peter's profession contained. Okay, let's look at what Peter really said. In verse 16, Simon Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Let's take that first phrase there. You are the Christ. Peter didn't say you are a Christ or one of the Christ. He said you are the Christ. And that word Christ, it is the Greek equivalent of the Hebrew word Messiah. Well, what does Messiah mean? Messiah simply means anointed one. And so what Peter was saying there is, you are Jesus, the Messiah, the anointed one, the only anointed one. But not only that, Peter said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now we can't overlook that word, living. I mean, think about it. Peter didn't say you are the Son of God. Peter said you are the Son of the living God. There is only one true living God.